living with love. That's keeping her from love. Maybe an ex-lover, could be a father. I don't know, all I can tell how she relates to me. But I would give all of my heart if she would just believe. She don't know love, I love you. She don't know love is right here. Oh, she don't know love, I love you. Love is far away from the pain that I see in her eyes. But all of that will change when she's mine. It's more than sexual. I'm a reflection of the feeling that's in your soul. It's more than magical. Girl, let me take you on a journey that you should know. Don't let the pain from your past keep you from what you're looking for. I promise to give all my heart. I'm the one that you adore. She don't know. Can you tell when a real man will wanna love you and protect your heart? Don't let your pain destroy love's far away from the pain that I see in her eyes. But all of that will change when she's mine. I can't let you go.
Good morning. Good morning, YouTube. Hi, how are you? Oh, it works. Okay. Hi, everybody. How you doing? Good morning, sunshines. I didn't think I would be here today. Well, not here. Like I was, I always want to wake up. I just didn't think I was going to be on YouTube today. But I am. Hey, Foxy. Hey, Bo. Good morning. It is beautiful outside. I just came in from my staycation. Yes, if you would like to, please hit the like, the unlike, the thumb. What is it? Thumbs up, like none of that stuff matters to me anymore. Not like the subscriber count, none of that really like that. That's like a bonus round for me. But yeah, my YouTube channel is like my little public journal. ish, because I ain't telling y'all all of the things, because YouTube and the internets and the social medias are vicious out here, and y'all do terrible things to each other. But that's humanity, right? So it is what it ain't. But anyway, I am here today because I wasn't gonna come. I've been on vacation all week, and I took a little staycation in state because I'm trying to save up some money. I'm trying to move and do some other things right now, pay off some debt that I have that has accumulated over my lifetime. I want to shout out to the Public Service Loan Forgiveness Program that was implemented. Listen, y'all, I don't really consider money to be blessings, right? But the forgiveness of that burden, it just is a weight off of my it's just a weight that has been lifted, and I'm very thankful. So I'm thankful to the universe. I'm thankful to God and all of the things for the Public Service Loan Forgiveness Program that was implemented for Bauer. I can't say the word. If you borrow something, you are a borrower. Say that fast 3 times. Borrower. Borrower. Anyway, if you borrow money from the federal government, and after you borrowed your money for your education, if you went into the public sector like I did, and paid 120 payments over these last whatever decades of your loan, the government is forgiving whatever you still owed. And so, yeah, that is one thing that has recently taken place for me. I'm going to lift up my theme song. I don't like that top part of my ceiling per se. Anyway, so yeah, another thing that I wanted to share today. So I looked at the book that I've been reading with you guys that I started, A New Earth, Eckhart Tolle, because that is my mindfulness, not teacher. I don't like the word guru either. Mindfulness, light. I'll give him light. He's been my mindfulness light lately. And so the question that I asked myself when I came home was, are you going to go live? Because I still need to work out. I still need to get ready for work tomorrow. But I have some time for that because it's still early in the morning. And I told myself that if the next chapter had anything to do with what I kind of went through this past week, that I would go live today. So I opened up to chapter 2. Ego. Yeah. I had to, over this last week, put my ego in check. And y'all, that's hard to do. Put your ego in check. That means you got to put yourself in check. Yes, I had to put my ego in check. And what made it even much more difficult for me to put my ego in check was because I had to put my ego in check about my child. Woo. Okay, so I'm not about to sit up here and start crying on these YouTube streets, but I have a just turned 18-year-old son. And before my son was born, my job was to protect him. He was diagnosed with a condition that it was just worst case scenario across the board. They told me I should have had an abortion. My ex-husband had his feelings that he felt about our son. And so my job has been to protect him. I have 2 kids. Protect them both. But this little boy, it was just different. The pregnancy was different. The experience was different. Having a sick baby was different. Like, it was just different. And so, you know, he turned 18. I know who I was when I was 18. I know some of the things that I did. I don't necessarily know who his dad was when he was 18, but I know my ex-husband's life, right? And so now that my son has reached this magical golden door of I'm a grown-up age, he's feeling it. You know, he's letting his nuts hang out right now. And so he wants to be grown. And y'all, this little embryo that I carried, that God blessed me with, is now a grown man in his mind. And so my protection in that way has to change. And that's hard. I didn't know it was gonna be hard. My daughter wasn't hard. She's still she's still my baby, right? She still calls me for advice. She still talks to me every day. But this boy is different. He is a different species. And I can't be a father. I'm not a father. I am a woman. I am a mom. And so to have to give him space, whoo, that's hard. Because of this thing right here, ego. My ego was like, girl, no. He still needs you. He still needs you to make those doctor's appointments. He still needs you to do these things. And he does not. He needs to figure out some things for himself. And he will probably fall. He will probably fail. And as a parent, you just don't want that to happen. So this week, in order for me to give him space, I had to put myself in timeout. I put myself in timeout. I checked into a hotel because I was off all week. And I worked on me. I was quiet. I was still. And it's 2 songs. And I worked out. I didn't eat crazy. I only ate really once a day. So I allowed myself to kind of vacation, eat. But it's 2 songs before I get into the book that I want to share with y'all, the lyrics of these 2 Kendrick Lamar songs that really like I've had Kendrick Lamar on repeat since last year. I think the album came out last year, Mr. Morale and the Big Steppers. Like, that is it's just it speaks to me. I don't know if everybody loves that album. I think the younger people don't necessarily love it, but I'm an old head and I find that it's just a wonderful piece of artwork. So these 2 songs kind of speak to some of the work, and I'm not there. Like, I'm not all the way there. I ran into my son Wednesday. He came home and I had Thursday, because I had to help my mom do some things on Thursday. So I had to come home Thursday. And when I saw him, my energy still wasn't right. Like, I knew I still was not capable. And I don't know that I'm still capable yet, because I haven't, he's probably at work or doing his thing somewhere. But now that I have to go to work, I know I'll go to sleep early. I won't really see him this week because I'm back to work. So that gives me space to still work on me, and hopefully it gives him space to live his best life. And hopefully what I had to figure out was, just like my mom, I thought about how I was at his age. I was in college at his age, but I can't imagine what my mom went through with me when I was his age. I was doing some dumb shit. And how she was able to navigate that with me, God bless her. Just thank you, God, because I'm okay. Like, I'm okay today. But for a mother to be able, or a parent, because I can only speak from a mother's perspective, I don't have a father in the home for my kids. Just from a parenting perspective of a single mom, to have to like give your children to the world and kind of fall back from that, that's hard. It's hard. And when you see in your child what you know was in you, all you can do is pray that you instilled enough love, enough God, not religion. I didn't instill religion in my kids, but I did instill spirituality and God in them. All you can hope and pray is that you gave them enough of that so that they could navigate this unapologetic world that we live in, right? So that's what I've been working on over this past week. And so, with that said, I want to share some of these lyrics, and then I'm gonna get into the book. I'm gonna read chapter 2, and then I gotta go because I got some things to do. I gotta work out still and get ready for work tomorrow. I had to print out the lyrics. So the 2 songs that I'm going to reference the lyrics from, the first song is Mirror. This is on, both of these songs are on Kendrick Lamar's. I would have played the songs, but y'all know how YouTube is. I don't really necessarily care about the copyright. I want to keep my channel for future, just because my channel is for future generations, for the me version of me that doesn't exist yet necessarily. So I would like for my channel to be here for as long as YouTube is a thing. So I'm going to read these lyrics because I don't need Kendrick and the record labels trying to strike my channel and take me down. All right, so the first one is Mirror. So this is a song that Kendrick has with Kodak Black. I'm not trying to read them like I'm a rapper. I'm just gonna read the lyrics. So the first verse says, "The pressure's taking over me. It's beginning to loom. Better if I spare your feelings and tell you the truth. Lately, I redirected my point of view. You won't grow waiting on me." So that just kind of reminds me of where I'm at with my son right now. Like, he's not going to grow. He has to grow on his own right now. Hopefully the soil that he was raised in, the fertilizer that I was able to give him, the watering of his family is enough. I can't live in the matrix, rather fall short of your graces. This time I won't trade places. Not about who's right, who's wrong. It's not for me and my son. Evolve, the only thing known. Ask me when I'm coming home. Blink twice again, I'm gone. Child, that's why I had to leave. I had to leave my house and get my soul right because I wasn't right. And I didn't want my energy around his energy. It wouldn't have been a good thing. I'm going to fast forward to the verse 3. Because all of it's toxic. Girl, I'm not relevant to giving on profit. Darling, my demons is off the leash for a mosh pit. Oh, wait. That's not the one I want to read. That's verse 3. I'm going to the bridge. For a mosh pit. Baby, I just had a baby. You know she needs me. Working on myself and counseling is not easy. Okay, I'm not going to read that one. I want to read the bridge. The bridge is... I realize true love's not saving face, but unconditional. When will you let me go? This is me letting my son kind of go. Not really, but I trust you'll find independence. If not, then all is forgiven. Sorry I didn't save the world, my friend. I was too busy building mine again. I choose me. I'm sorry. And so that's me talking to myself about my ego and how I feel about my son, needing his independence, needing to be what he probably thinks is a grown man right now, whether I think so or not. It's not about me. It's not about you. It's not about me. It's about my boy. All right. And then this last one, I'm just going to read part of I think I'm going to read all of verse 3. This song is Savior. This is the same album. The cat is out of the bag. I am not your savior. This is me. I'm not my son's savior. I'm not. Like, parents, I know we want to be our children's savior. We can't be. We can't be. I find it just as difficult to love thy neighbors, especially when people get ambiguous favors. But their heart's not in it. See, everything's for the paper. The struggle for the that's my son. It's about paper for him right now. I'm trying to, keep his health together. He don't want to go to doctor's appointments. I can't force that young man. I can't. But their heart's not in it, see. Everything's for the paper. The struggle for the right side of history. Independent thought is like an eternal enemy. Capitalists posing as compassionates be offering me. Yeah, suck my D. I ain't gonna say that word. Suck my D with authenticity. Yeah, Tupac dead. Gotta think for yourself. Yeah, heroes looking for the villains to help. I never been sophisticated, saving face, being manipulative, such an acquired taste. I rubbed elbows with people that was for the people. They are greedy. I don't care for no public speaking. And this is the part right here that really resonates with me. And they wonder where I've been. This is why I don't come on YouTube often. Protecting my soul in the valley of silence. With that said, let's get into chapter 2, y'all. Ego. The current state of humanity. Words, no matter whether they are vocalized and made into sounds or remain unspoken as thoughts, can cast an almost hypnotic spell upon you. That's why when I saw my son Thursday and my energy wasn't right, even if I didn't say the words to him that I was feeling, that energy was still there. My son knows energy. He's well adept at understanding energy. And he knows my energy. I didn't need to be around him. My energy was toxic. I was well aware that my energy was toxic. And I had to give him some space. I had to give myself some space. Because I wasn't going to say nothing to him. But the words were still there. The things I wanted to say, they were still there. You easily lose yourself in them, become hypnotized into implicitly believing that when you have attached a word to something, you know what it is. The fact is, you don't know what it is. You have only covered up the mystery with a label. Everything, a bird, a tree, even a simple stone, and certainly a human being, is ultimately unknowable. This is because it has unfathomable depth. All we can perceive, experience, think about is the surface layer of reality, less than the tip of an iceberg. Underneath the surface appearance, everything is not only connected with everything else, but also with the source of all life out of which it came. Even a stone, and more easily a flower or a bird, could show you the way back to God, to the source, to yourself. When you look at it or hold it and let it be, without imposing a word or mental label on it, a sense of awe, a wonder arises within you. Its essence silently communicates itself to you and reflects your own essence back to you. This is what great artists sense and succeed in conveying in their art. Van Gogh didn't say, "That's just an old chair." He looked and looked and looked. He sensed the beingness of the chair. Then he sat in front of the canvas and took up the brush. The chair itself would have sold for the equivalent of a few dollars. The painting of that same chair today would fetch in excess of $25 million. When you don't cover up the world with words and labels, a sense of the miraculous returns to your life that was lost a long time ago when humanity, instead of using thought, became possessed by thought. A depth returns to your life. Things regain their newness, their freshness. And the greatest miracle is the experiencing of your essential self as prior to any words, thoughts, mental labels, and images. For this to happen, you need to disentangle your sense of I, of beingness, from all the things it has become mixed up with, even parenting. That is to say, identified with. I have identified with being my son's protector. I had to undo that. I'm still working on it. I ain't there. That's why I'm teary-eyed, child, because that's hard. That disentanglement is what this book is about. The quicker you are in attaching verbal or mental labels to things, people, or situations, the more shallow and lifeless your reality becomes. And the more deadened you become to reality. The miracle of life that continuously unfolds within and around you. In this way, cleverness may be gained, but wisdom is lost. And so are joy, love, creativity, and aliveness. I can attest to that joy part and the wisdom too, to a certain degree, right? The joy part, I should not feel angry at at my kid. I shouldn't think I know all the things, but to let your child out in the world that you've protected them from for all of their life, y'all, that's hard work. And nobody told me about it. Nobody prepared me for this part. There was no books. I read books about being pregnant. I watched videos about having babies and all of that. I already had a mothering nature. I've been teaching kids since I was 13 years old. That was not hard. Doing it by myself was hard, but overall, it just wasn't hard. This right here, though, woo, they are concealed in the still gap between the perception and the interpretation. Of course, we have to use words and thoughts. They have their own beauty. But do we need to become imprisoned in them? Words reduce reality to something the human mind can grasp, which isn't very much. Language consists of 5 basic sounds produced by the vocal cords. They are the vowels A, E, I, O, U. The other sounds are consonants produced by air pressure, S, F, G, and so forth. Do you believe some combination of such basic sounds could ever explain who you are, or the ultimate purpose of the universe, or even what a tree or stone is in its depth? The illusory self. The word I embodies the greatest error and the deepest truth, depending on how it is used. In conventional usage, it is not only one of the most frequently used words in the language, together with the related words me, my, mine, and myself, but also one of the most misleading. In normal everyday usage, I embodies the primordial error, a misperception of who you are, an illusory sense of identity. This is the ego. This illusory sense of self is what Albert Einstein, who had deep insights not only into the reality of space and time, but also into human nature, referred to as an optical illusion of consciousness. That illusory self then becomes the basis for all further interpretations, or rather misinterpretations of reality. All thought processes interactions and relationships, your reality becomes a reflection of the original illusion. The good news is, if you can recognize illusion as illusion, it dissolves. The recognition of illusion is also its ending. Its survival depends on your mistaking it for reality. In the seeing of who you are not, the reality of who you are emerges by itself. I am not my son's savior. I am not my son's savior. That's hard, but I am not my son's savior. This is what happens as you slowly and carefully read this and the next chapter, which are about the mechanics of the false self we call the ego. So, what is the nature of this illusory self? What you usually refer to when you say I is not who you are. By a monstrous act of reductionism, the infinite depth of who you are is confused with the sound produced by the vocal cords of the thought of I in your mind and whatever the I has identified with. So, what do the sounds I and the related me, my, or mine refer to? When a young child learns that a sequence of sounds produced by the parent's vocal cords is his or her name, the child begins to equate a word, which in the mind becomes a thought, with who he or she is. At that stage, some children refer to themselves in the third person. Johnny is hungry. Soon after, they learn the magic word I and equate it with their name, which they have already equated with who they are. Then other thoughts come and emerge with the original I thought. The next step are thoughts of me and mine to designate things that are somehow part of I. This is identification with objects, which means investing things, but ultimately thoughts that represent things with a sense of self, thereby deriving an identity from them. When my toy breaks or is taken away, intense suffering arises. Not because of any intrinsic value that the toy has. The child will soon lose interest in it, and it will be replaced by other toys, other objects. But because of the thought of mine, the toy became part of the child's developing sense of self, of I. And so, as the child grows up, the original I thought tracks other thoughts to itself. It becomes identified with a gender, possessions, the sense perceived body, a nationality, race, religion, profession. Other things the I identifies with are roles. Watch me. Mother, father, husband, wife, and so on. Accumulated knowledge or opinions, likes and dislikes, and also things that happened to me in the past, the memory of which are thoughts that further define my sense of self as me and my story. These are the these are only some of the things people derive their sense of identity from. They are ultimately no more than thoughts held together precariously by the fact that they are all invested with a sense of self, ego. It's not about me. Ego. This mental construct is what you normally refer to when you say I. To be more precise, most of the time it is not you who speaks when you think of I, but some aspect of that mental construct, the egoic self. Once you awaken, you still use the word I, but it will come from a much deeper place within yourself. That is what I'm working on. Releasing the I-ness of my relationship with my children. Good morning, astute Queen Bee. Good morning. Good morning. Good morning. Thank you for being here. Y'all, it's difficult to release that ego from your children that you raised, that you nurtured, that you loved. Nobody prepares you for this part. I was not prepared. I'm thankful that I had started this mindfulness journey because I knew my energy was not in a good space. I'm thankful that I had this week off of when he was flexing his manhood so that I could just give him the space. I'm not fully there yet, but I'm aware. Bars. I'm not there, but I'm aware. And that's what I'm working on, my ego. Foxy says, good morning. It has been a while. I'm not here very often in the studio. My new job and life is lifing, and YouTube is a bit of a chaotic place that I don't necessarily like. I don't like the chaos. I don't like I don't like some of the things that I saw. So I had to unplug from all of that. I couldn't deal with any of that. I had to go to some new spaces that were a bit safer for me, just in general. Most people are still completely identified with the incessant stream of mind, of compulsive thinking, most of it repetitive and pointless. There is no I apart from their thought processes and the emotions that go with them. This is the meaning of being spiritually unconscious. When told that there is a voice in their head that never stops speaking, they say, what voice? Or angrily deny it, which of course is the voice, is the thinker, is the unobserved mind. It could almost be looked upon as an entity that has taken possession of them. These are people who are not self-aware of who they are in the world. They see everybody else. I understand how you're feeling. Child, listen. They say, so I work with a lot of people like this. Like everything else is everybody else. Nothing is. Let me think. Let me rethink about how I'm approaching my work. It is, we're not going to change. Oh, this is one of the words that until now, I didn't understand the damage that this word really does to human beings. Traditions. We have some very not thoughtful traditions that we uphold in our society, in these institutions that we work in these institutions that we visit, churches, all of that stuff. Tradition is the killjoy of growth. Traditions will kill mindfulness. Every time you hold your hat on a tradition, we do it this way because your great grandmama taught you this. You are not your great grandmama. That tradition is racist. We have got to undo some of the damage that we have learned. And it's nobody's fault, right? Like your parents could only be who they were. Your grandparents could only be who they were. You can only be who you are. But because you are still here in this year of 2023, hello, future self. In this year of 2023, your job is to do the work so that you can undo some of the damage. You don't keep the damage going forward because of tradition. Why would you keep eating like that when you don't have to? Why would you keep poisoning your mind, your body, and your spirit because of tradition? No. We are better than that. We are better beings than that. Tradition will keep you stuck in a cycle that you cannot get out of because you want to keep traditions alive. Reimagine those traditions. How do you make those traditions relevant in the year of 2023? Some people never forget the first time they disidentified from their thoughts and thus briefly experienced the shift in identity from being the content of their mind to being the awareness in the background. For others, it happens in such a subtle way that they hardly notice it, or they just notice an influx of joy or inner peace without knowing the reason. I'm somewhere in between. I have been on this journey my entire life. Before now, I was very unaware of what I was doing. There were things happening that fed into me being a much more mindful human being, but I was not conscious of it. It was part of who I was going to become, but I was very unaware. I was just out here living my best life, YOLO, right? But within COVID and moving into 50 and beyond, I am fully aware of my emotions, of my feelings, of my humanity. And because I am aware, I move differently. I think differently. I respond differently. And everybody ain't ready for that. Because as human beings, we like to put things in categories. We like to put people in categories, and we really, really freeze people in time. If you met me last year and you think I'm the same person I was last year, you don't know me. You are not my friend. You have no idea of who I am today. When you meet me next year, God willing, I will not be this same version of myself. I will have evolved into something different. I am aware now. I am aware of consciousness. I am aware of my inner being. I am aware of the universe. I give grace and space to all things. That is awareness. My ego still exists. I am still a human being. I'm still going to make mistakes. I still have a lot to learn. But I am aware. I am awake. I'm not woke. All this woke culture is propaganda. Awareness, evolving, elevation. That is where I'm at. The voice in the head. The first glimpse of awareness came to me when I was a first-year student at the University of London. I would take the tube, subway, twice a week to go to the university library, usually around 9 o'clock in the morning. Toward the end of the rush hour, one time, a woman in her early 30s sat opposite me. I had seen her before a few times on the train. One could not help but notice her. Although the train was full, the seats on either side of her were unoccupied. The reason being, no doubt, that she appeared to be quite insane. She looked extremely tense and talked to herself incessantly in a loud and angry voice. She was so absorbed in her thoughts that she was totally unaware, it seemed, of other people or her surroundings. Her head was facing downward and slightly to the left, as if she were addressing someone sitting in the empty seat next to her. Although I don't remember the precise content, her monologue went something like this. And then she said to me, so I said to her, you are a liar. How dare you accuse me of? When you are the one who has always taken advantage of me, I trusted you and you betrayed my trust. There was the angry tone in her voice of someone who is being wronged, who needs to defend her position lest she become annihilated. As the train approached Tottenham Court Road station, she stood up and walked toward the door with still no break in the stream of words coming out of her mouth. That was my stop too, so I got off behind her. At street level, she began to walk toward Belford Square, still engaged in her imaginary dialogue, still angrily accusing and asserting her position. My curiosity aroused, I decided to follow her. as long as she was walking in the same general direction I had to go in. Although engrossed in her imaginary dialogue, she seemed to know where she was going. Soon, we were within sight of the imposing structure of Senate House, a 1930s high rise, the university's central administrative building and library. I was shocked. Was it possible that we were going to the same place? Yes, that's where she was heading. Was she a teacher? A student? An office worker? A librarian? Maybe she was some psychologist research project? I never knew the answer. I walked 20 steps behind her, and by the time I entered the building, which ironically was the location of the headquarters of the Mind Police in the film version of George Orwell's novel 1984, she had already been swallowed up by one of the elevators. I was somewhat taken aback by what I had just witnessed. A mature first year student at 25, I saw myself as an intellectual in the making, and I was convinced that all the answers to the dilemmas of human existence could be found through the intellect. That is to say, by thinking. That is one thing that I'm very aware of. There is more in silence. Protecting yourself in the valley of silence, speaking in the vernacular of silence, as Sinful the P would say. You learn more. You become more aware when you close your mouth and stop thinking of a response to the world. You become more aware and attuned to what is happening within you and around you when you shut the fuck up. I didn't realize yet that thinking without awareness is the main dilemma of human existence. I looked upon the professors as sages who had all the answers, and upon the university as the temple of knowledge. How could an insane person like her be part of this? I was still thinking about her when I was in the men's room prior to entering the library. As I was washing my hands, I thought, I hope I don't end up like her. The man next to me looked briefly in my direction, and I suddenly was shocked when I realized that I hadn't just thought those words, but mumbled them out loud. Oh my God, I'm already like her, I thought. Wasn't my mind as incessantly active as hers? There were only minor differences between us. The predominant underlying emotion behind her thinking seemed to be anger. In my case, it was mostly anxiety. She thought out loud. I thought mostly in my head. If she was mad, then everyone was mad, including myself. There were differences in degree only. This type of thinking, y'all, has helped me at work. I have a mentor coach that I work with, and I tap into him once a month on a Zoom conference call. And my mentor, we had our second session last month. I don't even know how I got here, but what I was able to share with him was that I'm learning love. I'm learning what love looks like, right? When I first got to my new job, I still do, I question everything in the world. I have a motto that I live by: be curious, question everything, and ask. It is on my wall in my office. Be curious, question everything, and ask. And I truly believe that. My curiosity does lead to judgment, though, because I'm a human being, right? And I'm not trying to be judgy, but it is what it is. We are all humans. We judge people, whether we think we do or don't, we do. And so I try to be less judgy. And so when I find myself judging other human beings, I look within myself like, what is that? What, like, why are you, girl? Fix that. Do some work on you. Because how dare you judge another human being, right? So as I was doing the work on myself to get my mind right about my workplace, one day I was just outside at bus duty, watching the families, picking up kids, driving off, getting on buses, and all I saw was love. It looked different than the love that I've seen exhibited, but yet it was love. It was love in action. These people, as privileged as they are, they have fears. They have psychoses. They have unawareness of others who don't exist in the same space as them. I became aware of that throughout this past year in my new position. And I told my coach, I'm learning that love looks differently, right? When we think about parents and how they parent, and we want to judge their parenting, how dare you? Love looks differently. When you think about poor neighborhoods where kids don't have good shoes or clothes or food to eat, it doesn't mean that they're not loved. Love looks differently. For a moment, I was able to stand back from my own mind and see it from a deeper perspective, as it were. There was a brief shift from thinking to awareness. I was still in the men's room, but alone now, looking at my face in the mirror. At that moment of detachment from my mind, I laughed out loud. It may have sounded insane, but it was the laughter of sanity, the laughter of the big-bellied Buddha. Life isn't as serious as my mind makes it out to be. That's what the laughter seemed to be saying. But it was only a glimpse, very quickly to be forgotten. I would spend the next 3 years in anxiety and depression, completely identified with my mind. I had to get close to suicide before awareness returned. And then it was much more than a glimpse. I became free of compulsive thinking and of the false mind-made I. It is very different for everybody, astute. It looks differently. It feels differently. It identifies differently. Love is, period. There is no love is that. Love is. That's it. Don't tell me my love is not love. Don't tell me how I nurtured my children wasn't love. Don't tell me the space that I have to now give my son isn't in love. The above incident not only gave me a first glimpse of awareness, it also planted the first doubt as to the absolute validity of the human intellect. A few months later, something tragic happened that made my doubt grow. On a Monday morning, we arrived for a lecture to be given by a professor whose mind I admired greatly, only to be told that sadly, he had committed suicide sometime during the weekend by shooting himself. I was stunned. He was a highly respected teacher and seemed to have all the answers. However, I could as yet see no alternative to the cultivation of thought. I didn't realize yet that thinking is only a tiny aspect of the consciousness that we are, nor did I know anything about the ego, let alone being able to detect it within myself. Content and structure of the ego. The egoic mind is completely conditioned by the past. And this is what I had to work on this week. I couldn't let who I was at 18, who I was as I matured through life, I couldn't let who I knew my ex-husband was. I could not let that past lead my relationship with my child. My child is his own consciousness. He is his own being. I couldn't let the past control how I love him, how I relate with him. I could not let the past have a relationship with me and my son. Its conditioning is twofold. It consists of content and structure. In the case of a child who cries in deep suffering because his toy has been taken away, the toy represents content. It is interchangeable with any other content, any other toy or object. The contents you identify with, it's conditioned by your environment, your upbringing, the surrounding culture. Whether the child is rich or poor, whether the toy is a piece of wood shaped like an animal or a sophisticated electronic gadget, makes no difference as far as the suffering caused by its loss is concerned. The reason why such acute suffering occurs is concealed in the word my, and it is structural. The unconscious compulsion to enhance one's identity through association with an object is built into the very structure of the egoic mind. One of the most basic mind structures through which the ego comes into existence is identification. The word identification is derived from the Latin word idem. So when I identify with something, I make it the same. The same as what? The same as I. I endow it with a sense of self, and so it becomes part of my identity. One of the most basic levels of identification is with things. My toy later becomes my cat, my house, my clothes, and so on. I try to find myself in things, but never quite make it and end up losing myself in them. That is the fate of the ego. Identification with things. The people in the advertising industry know very well that in order to sell things that people don't really need, they must convince them that those things will add something to how they see themselves or how they are seen by others. In other words, add something to their sense of self. They do this, for example, by telling you that you will stand out from the crowd by using this product, and so, by implication, be more fully yourself. Or they may create an association in your mind between the product and a famous person, or a youthful, attractive, or happy looking person. Even pictures of old or deceased celebrities in their prime work well for that purpose. The unspoken assumption is that by buying this product through some magical act of appropriation, you become like them, or rather, the surface image of them. And so, in many cases, you are not buying a product, but an identity enhancer. Designer labels are primarily collective identities that you buy into. They are expensive and therefore exclusive. If everybody could buy them, they would lose their psychological value. And all you would be left with would be their material value, which likely amounts to a fraction of what you actually paid for it. What kind of things you identify with will vary from person to person according to age, gender, income, social class, fashion, the surrounding culture, and so on. What you identify with is all to do with the content, whereas the unconscious compulsion to identify is structural. It is one of the most basic ways in which the egoic mind operates. Paradoxically, what keeps the so-called consumer society going is the fact that trying to find yourself through things does not work. Does not work. You get a new car, the car gets old, you need a new car. You get a new purse, the purse gets old, you need a new purse. You get some shoes, the shoes get old, you need some new shoes. Doesn't work. You will not find yourself in things. Things don't last. Nothing in this world lasts. You get a new house, the house gets a leaky roof, the basement floods. Now you're not happy anymore. The homeowner association fees kick in. Now you mad. Paradoxically, what keeps the so-called consumer society going is the fact that trying to find yourself through things doesn't work. The ego satisfaction is short-lived. And so you keep looking for more. You keep buying. You keep consuming. It's like being a drug addict. You will never get that first high back. But you keep looking. Same with food. It tastes good, but now you're full and you're sleepy, or you don't want to work out, or you overate, you ate too much, it wasn't good for you, or now your arteries are clogged, or now your diabetes is acting up. All of that stuff is feeding the ego. It doesn't work. It won't satisfy you. It won't fulfill you. It won't fill you up. Of course, in this physical dimension that our surface selves inhabit, things are a necessary and inescapable part of our lives. We need housing, clothes, furniture, tools, transportation. There may also be things in our lives that we value because of their beauty or inherent quality. We need to honor the world of things, not despise it. Each thing has beingness, is a temporary form that has its origins within the formless one life, the source of all things, all bodies, all forms. In most ancient cultures, people believed that everything, even so called inanimate objects, had an indwelling spirit. And in this respect, they were closer to the truth than we are today. When you live in a world deadened by the mental abstractions, you don't sense the aliveness of the universe anymore. Most people don't inhabit a living reality, but a conceptualized one. But we cannot really honor things if we use them as a means of self-enhancement. That is to say, if we try to find ourselves through them. This is exactly what the ego does. Ego identification with things creates attachment to things, obsession with things, which in turn creates our consumer society and economic structures where the only measure of progress is always more. The unchecked striving for more, for endless growth, is a dysfunction and it is a disease. It is the same dysfunction the cancerous cell manifests, whose only goal is to multiply itself, unaware that it is bringing about its own destruction by destroying the organism of which it is a part. Some economists are so attached to the notion of growth that they can't let go of that word. So they refer to recession as a time of negative growth. A large part of many people's lives is consumed by an obsessive preoccupation with things. This is why one of the ills of our times is object proliferation. When you can no longer feel the life that you are likely to try to fill up your life with things. As a spiritual practice, I suggest that you investigate your relationship with the world of things through self-observation, and in particular, things that are designated with the word my. You need to be alert and honest to find out, for example, whether your sense of self-worth is bound up with things you possess. Do certain things induce a subtle feeling of importance or superiority? Does the lack of them make you feel inferior to others who have more than you? Do you casually mention things you own or show them off to increase your sense of worth in someone else's eyes and through them in your own? Do you feel resentful or angry and somehow diminished in your sense of self when someone else has more than you, or when you lose a prized possession? The lost ring. When I was seeing people as a counselor and a spiritual teacher, I would visit a woman twice a week whose body was riddled with cancer. She was a school teacher in her mid 40s and had been given no more than a few months to live by her doctors. Sometimes a few words were spoken during those visits, but mostly we would sit together in silence. And as we did, she had her first glimpses of the stillness within herself that she never knew existed during her busy life as a school teacher. One day, however, I arrived to find her in a state of great distress and anger. What happened? I asked. Her diamond ring, of great monetary as well as sentimental value, had disappeared. And she said she was sure it had been stolen by the woman who came to look after her for a few hours every day. She said she didn't understand how anybody could be so callous and heartless as to do this to her. She asked me whether she should confront the woman or whether it would be better to call the police immediately. I said I couldn't tell her what to do, but I asked her to find out how important a ring or anything else was at this point in her life. You don't understand, she said. This was my grandmother's ring. I used to wear it every day until I got ill and my hands became too swollen. It's more than just a ring to me. How can I not be upset? The quickness of her response and the anger and defensiveness in her voice were indications that she had not yet become present enough to look within and to disentangle her reaction from the event and to observe them both. Her anger and defensiveness were signs that she and the ego was still speaking through her. I said, I am going to ask you a few questions, but instead of answering them now, see if you can find the answers within you. I will pause briefly after each question. When an answer comes, it may not necessarily come in the form of words. She said she was ready to listen. I asked, do you realize that you will have to let go of the ring at some point, perhaps quite soon? How much more time do you need before you will be ready to let go of it? Will you become less when you let go of it? Has who you are become diminished by the loss? There were a few minutes of silence after the last question. When she started speaking again, there was a smile on her face, and she seemed at peace. The last question made me realize something important. First, I went to my mind for an answer, and my mind said, yes, of course you have been diminished. Then I asked myself the question again. Has who I am become diminished? This time I tried to feel rather than think the answer. And suddenly I could feel my I amness. I have never felt that before. If I can feel the I am so strongly, then who I am hasn't been diminished at all. I can still feel it now, something peaceful, but very alive. I am that I am. That is the joy of being, I said. You can only feel it when you get out of your head. Being must be felt. It can't be thought. The ego doesn't know about it because thought is what it consists of. The ring was really in your head as a thought that you confused with the sense of I am. You thought the I am or a part of it was in the ring. Whatever the ego seeks and gets attached to are substitutes for the being that it cannot feel. You can value and care for things, but whenever you get attached to them, you will know it's the ego. You have a blessed day as well, Astu. Thank you for being here. I appreciate you. As you are never really attached to a thing, but to a thought that has I, me, or mine in it. Whenever you completely accept a loss, you go beyond ego and who you are. The I am, which is consciousness itself, emerges. She said, "Now I understand something Jesus said that never made much sense to me before. If someone takes your shirt, let him have your coat as well." That's right, I said. It doesn't mean you should never lock your door. All it means is that sometimes letting things go is an act of far greater power than defending or hanging on. Why is the song Before I Let Go playing in my head right now? Before I let go. Da, da, da. In the last few weeks of her life, as her body became weaker, she became more and more radiant, as if light were shining through her. She gave many of her possessions away, some to the women she thought had stolen the ring. And with each thing she gave away, her joy deepened. When her mother called me to let me know she had passed away, she also mentioned that after her death, they found her ring in the medicine cabinet in the bathroom. Did the woman return the ring, or had it been there all the time? Nobody will ever know. One thing we do know: life will give you whatever experience is most helpful for the evolution of your consciousness. How do you know this is the experience you need? Because this is the experience that you are having in this moment. There was a part of me that had to let go of a part of my relationship with my son that has been intact since before he was a part of this realm of living. And everything had to happen exactly the way that it did in order for me to transform, to allow myself, excuse me, to let that relationship transform. Because this is the experience you are having in this moment. Whatever your experience is, it is destined. It is the will and the way. The universe is undefeated. Is it wrong then to be proud of one's possessions or to feel resentful towards people who have more than you? Not at all. The sense of pride, of needing to stand out, the apparent enhancement of one's self through more than, and diminishment through less than is neither right or wrong. It is the ego. The ego isn't wrong. It's just unconscious. When you observe the ego in yourself, you are beginning to go beyond it. Don't take the ego too seriously. When you detect egoic behavior in yourself, smile and go check into a hotel room. Get out. Don't let your ego get in your way of your relationship with your people that you love. At times, you may even laugh. How could humanity have taken in by this for so long? Above all, know that the ego isn't personal. It's not about you. It isn't who you are. If you consider the ego to be your personal problem, you got a problem. It's just the ego. The illusion of ownership. To own something, what does it really mean? What does it mean to make something mine? If you stand on a street in New York, point to a huge skyscraper and say, "That building is mine. I own it." You are either very wealthy or delusional or a liar. In any case, you are telling a story in which the thought form I and the thought form building merge into one. That's how the mental concept of ownership works. If everybody agrees with your story, there will be signed pieces of paper to certify their agreement with it. You are wealthy. If nobody agrees with the story, they will send you to a psychiatrist. You are a delusional or a compulsive liar. It is important to recognize here that the story and the thought forms that make up the story, whether people agree with it or not, have absolutely nothing to do with who you are. Even if people agree with it, it is ultimately a fiction. Many people don't realize until they are on their deathbed and everything external falls away that no thing ever had anything to do with who they are. In the proximity of death, the whole concept of ownership stands revealed as ultimately meaningless. In the last moments of their life, they then also realize that while they were looking throughout their lives for a more complete sense of self, what they were really looking for after being had actually always already been there, but had been largely obscured by their identification with things, which ultimately means identification with their mind, their ego. Blessed are the poor in spirit, Jesus said, for theirs will be the kingdom of heaven. What does poor in spirit mean? No inner baggage, no identifications, not with things, nor with any mental concepts that have a sense of self in them. And what is the kingdom of heaven? The simple but profound joy of being that is there when you let go of identification and so become poor in spirit. This is why renouncing all possessions has been an ancient spiritual practice in both East and West. Remunication of possession, however, will not automatically free you of your ego. It will attempt to ensure its survival by finding something else to identify with. For example, a mental image of yourself as someone who has transcended all interests in material possessions and is therefore superior is more spiritual than others. There are people who have renounced all possessions but have a bigger ego than some millionaires. If you take away one kind of identification, the ego will quickly find another. It ultimately doesn't mind what it identifies with as long as it has an identity. Anti-consumerism or anti-private ownership would be another thought form, another mental position that can replace identification with possessions. Through it, you could make yourself right and others wrong, as we shall see later. Making yourself right and others wrong is one of the principal egoic mind patterns, one of the main forms of unconsciousness. In other words, the content of the ego may change, the mind structure that keeps it alive does not. Foxy says, checking my ego now. This is a good read, for it is what we all need to do this. Thank you for opening up our eyes to do a self-check. Thank you for being here, Foxy. Thank you, and thank you. As much as I'm here for you and for whoever else can tune in today or catch me on the replay, y'all, there's selfishness in this. I'm here for me too. My ego, I had to check it before I wrecked it, before I wrecked my relationship with my son. Having a relationship with my children as adults is really important to me. And I will not let my ego get in the way of that. And because I have identified with the mothering, parenting, caring for, nurturing part of our relationship for almost 19 years now, I had to do some work on me, and I'm still doing the work, and this is helping me too. So thank you. Thank you for being here, Foxy. Thank you for being on this journey with me too. One of the unconscious assumptions is that by identifying with an object through the fiction of ownership, the apparent solidarity and permanency of that material object will endow your sense of self with greater solidarity and permanency. This applies particularly to the buildings and even more so to land since it is the only thing you think you can own that cannot be destroyed. Child, the government will come through and eminent domain your land. So don't believe the hype about land either. Your future your future children, your future generations. I think about that Alex Murdaugh case. Man, his greats left generational wealth for him. And he couldn't get out of his own ego. He had to do something to his wife and his son because his ego was in the way. So even your future generational wealth that you want to leave to your kids or generations for security, it's not a guaranteed security. Y'all are fighting for the wrong things out here. Your legacy is not money or land or anything else. Yes, have life insurance so your people don't go into debt trying to bury you. Yes, leave something for future generations, but don't let that ego be the reason. Don't think that your futures, egos, won't get in their way if you don't leave them something more than that materialism of this world. Leave them with some knowledge. Pour into them. Leave a space to help them grow when they're ready to be who they are meant to be. The absurdity of owning something becomes even more apparent in the case of land. In the days of the white settlement, the natives of North America found ownership of land an incomprehensible concept, and so they lost it when the Europeans made them sign pieces of paper that were equally incomprehensible to them. Is what I was just talking about. They felt they belonged to the land, and the land did not belong to them. The ego tends to equate having with being. I have, therefore I am. And the more I have, the more I am. The ego lives through comparison. How you are seen by others turns into how you see yourself. If everyone lived in a mansion or everyone was wealthy, your mansion or your wealth would no longer serve to enhance your sense of self. You could then move to a simple cabin, give up your wealth, and regain an identity by seeing yourself and being seen as more spiritual than others. How you are seen by others becomes the mirror that tells you what you are like and who you are. The ego sense of self-worth is in the most cases bound up with the worth you have in the eyes of others. You need others to give you a sense of self. And if you live in a culture that to a large extent equates self-worth with how much and what you have, if you cannot look through this collective delusion, you will be condemned to chasing after things for the rest of your life in the vain hope of finding your worth and completion of your sense of self there. How do you let go of attachment to things? Don't even try. It's impossible. Attachment to things drops away by itself when you no longer seek to find yourself in them. In the meantime, just be aware of your attachment to things. Sometimes you may not know that you are attached to something, which is to say, identified, until you lose it or there is the threat of loss. If you then become upset, anxious, and so on, it means you are attached. If you are aware that you are identified with a thing, the identification is no longer total. I am the awareness that is aware that there is attachment. That's the beginning of the transformation of consciousness. All right, this is a really long chapter. I'm on page 46 and there are 48 pages. Am I going to read 12 more pages? Woo! I don't know. Let me see. How many did I read already? I started at 25, 35. I've read 20, 21. So, girl, go on and read the last 12. I will. Wanting the need for more. And that's another reason I don't come on YouTube, because The books are really good for me and hopefully for whoever tunes in, but these chapters are long. And the way my ADHD is set up, I'm ready to get out this chair. But I will stay for 12 more pages. Wanting, the need for more. The ego identifies with having, but its satisfaction in having is a relatively shallow and short-lived one. Concealed within its remains a deep-seated sense of dissatisfaction, of incompleteness, of not enough. I don't have enough yet, by which the ego really means I am not enough yet. As we have seen, having, the concept of ownership, is a fiction created by the ego to give itself solidity and permanency and make itself stand out, make itself special. Since you cannot find yourself through having, however, there is another more powerful drive underneath it that pertains to the structure of the ego, the need for more, which we could also call wanting. No ego can last for long without the need for more. Therefore, wanting keeps the ego alive much more than having. The ego wants to want more than it wants to have. I'm going to read that again for y'all in the back. The ego wants to want more than it wants to have. And so the shallow satisfaction of having is always replaced by more wanting. This is the psychological need for more. That is to say, more things to identify with. It is an addictive need, not an authentic one. Ooh, it's not real. In some cases, the psychological need for more, or the feeling of not enough, that is so characteristic of the ego becomes transferred to the psychological level and so returns into insatiable hunger. The sufferers of bulimia will often make themselves vomit so they can continue eating. Their mind is hungry, not their body. This eating disorder would become healed if the sufferers, instead of being identified with their mind, could get in touch with their body and so feel the true needs of their body rather than the pseudo needs of the egoic mind. Some egos know what they want and pursue their aim with grim and ruthless determination. Genghis Khan, Stalin, Hitler, to give you just a few larger than life examples. The energy behind their wanting, however, creates an opposing energy of equal intensity that in the end leads to their downfall. Trump. Didn't he just get indicted? Yeah. Downfall. Ego. In the meantime, they make themselves and many others unhappy. Or, in the larger than life examples, create hell on earth. They call for rallies, the uprisings. They call for discontent in society. Most egos have conflicting wants. They want different things at different times, or may not even know what they want, except that they don't want what is. The present moment. Unease, restlessness, boredom, anxiety, dysfunction are the result of unfulfilled wanting. Wanting is structural, so no amount of content can provide lasting fulfillment as long as the intentional structure remains in place. Intense wanting that has no specific object can often be found in the still developing ego of teenagers, even 18-year-old males, boy childs, some of whom are in a permanent state of negativity and dissatisfaction. Ooh, they is reading my son. The physical needs for food, water, shelter, clothing, and basic comforts could be easily met for all humans on the planet, were it not for the imbalance of resources created by the insane and rapacious need for more. The greed of the ego. Why do billionaires need all that money? They could wipe homelessness out, but then they wouldn't be billionaires anymore. Ego. It finds collective expression in the economic structures of this world, such as the huge corporations, which are egoic entities that compete with each other for more. Their only blind aim is profit. They pursue that aim with absolute ruthlessness. Nature, animals, people, even their own employees are no more than digits on a balance sheet, lifeless objects to be used, then discarded. One of the things I told my boss at my old job, I think he was stressed out about something. And he was like, "You were always just so calm." I said, "Well, because one of the things that I'm very aware of is that if I die right now, my job will be posted next week. I will be replaced. We are all replaceable. You too." And he was like, "Wait a minute. What?" I said, "Yeah. You doing all this stressing about your work, about this and that for these people who, if something happens to you, will replace you. Be present with yourself. Be at one with yourself. When it's time to check out of work, check out of work. Give yourself space to work. Give yourself space to live your own life. This work, 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 work until I drop dead mentality, that's only beneficial to the corporation. That's not beneficial to you. Especially if you're a salaried employee, they're not going to give you no more money. And your stress level is going to rise. And you are that much closer to death because you stressed out. Hypertension, blood pressure, like you don't know. Heart attack, just stress. Why would you put all that stress on yourself? When you get off from work, be off from work. It's okay. The thought forms of me and mine, of more than, of I want, I need, I must have, and of not enough pertain not to content, but to the structure of the ego. The content is interchangeable. As long as you don't recognize those thought forms within yourself, as long as they remain unconscious, you will believe in what they say. You will be condemned to acting out those unconscious thoughts, condemned to seeking and not finding, because when those thought forms operate, no possession, no place, no person, no condition will ever satisfy you. You will be insatiable. No content will satisfy you as long as the egoic structure remains in place. No matter what you have or get, you will not be happy. You will always be looking for something else that promises greater fulfillment, that promises to make your complete sense of self complete and feel that sense of lack you feel within. Identification with the body. All right, we almost there, y'all. Apart from objects, another basic form of identification is my body. Firstly, the body is male or female. And so the sense of being a man or woman takes up a significant part of most people's sense of self. Gender becomes identity. Identification with gender is encouraged at an early age, and it forces you into a role, into conditioned patterns of behavior that affect all aspects of your life, not just sexuality. It is a role many people become completely trapped in, even more so in some of the traditional societies than in Western culture, where identification with gender is beginning to lessen somewhat. In some traditional cultures, the worst fate a woman can have is to be unwed or barren, and for a man to lack sexual potency and not be able to produce children. Life's fulfillment is perceived to be fulfillment of one's gender identity. Excuse me. In the West, it is their physical appearance of the body that contributes greatly to the sense of who they think you are. Its strength or weakness is perceived beauty or ugliness relative to others. For many people, their sense of self-worth is intimately bound up with their physical strength, good looks, fitness, and external appearance. Many feel a diminished sense of self worth because they perceive their body as ugly or imperfect. In some cases, the mental image or concept of my body is a complete distortion of reality. A young woman may think of herself as overweight and therefore starve herself when in fact she is quite thin. She cannot see her body anymore. All she sees is the mental concept of her body, which says, I am fat or I will become fat, as the root of this condition has identification with the mind. As people have become more and more mind identified, which is the intensification of egoic dysfunction, there has also been a dramatic increase in the incidence of anorexia in recent decades. And if the sufferer could look at her body without the interfering judgments of her mind, or even recognize those judgments for what they are instead of believing in them, or better still, if she could feel her body from within, the word this would initiate her healing. Excuse me, y'all. I've been sitting here too long. I'm telling you, my ADHD is kicking in. I can't even read straight no more. But I'm going to finish because I said I would. Those who are identified with their good looks, physical strength, or abilities experience suffering when those attributes begin to fade away, as of course they will. Their very identity that was based on them in their threatened is then threatened with collapse. In either case, ugly or beautiful, people derive a significant part of their identity, be it negative or positive, from their body. To be more precise, they derive their identity from the I thought that they erroneously attached to the mental image or concept of their body, which, after all, is no more than a physical form that shares the destiny of all forms, impermanence, and ultimately decay. I call these bodies avatars. We all have an avatar that we live in. Consciousness resides inside of this avatar. Equating the physical sense perceived body that is destined to grow old, wither, and die with I always leads to suffering sooner or later. To refrain from identifying with the body doesn't mean that you neglect, despise, or no longer care for it. If it is strong, beautiful, or vigorous, you can enjoy and appreciate those attributes while they last. You can also improve the body's condition through right nutrition and exercise. If you don't equate the body with who you are, then beauty fades, vigor diminishes, or the body becomes incapacitated. This will not affect your sense of worth or identity in any way. In fact, as the body begins to weaken, the formless dimension, the light of consciousness, can shine more easily through the fading form. It is not just people with good or near perfect bodies who are likely to to equate it with who they are. You can just as easily identify with a problematic body and make the body's imperfection, illness, or disability into your identity. You may then think and speak of yourself as a sufferer of this or that chronic illness or disability. You received a great deal of attention from doctors and others who constantly confirm to you your conceptual identity as a sufferer or a patient. You then unconsciously cling to the illness because it has become the most important part of who you perceive yourself to be. It has become another thought form with which the ego can identify. Once the ego has formed an identity, it does not want to let go. Amazingly, but not infrequently, the ego, in search of a stronger identity, can and does create illnesses in order to strengthen itself through them. Feeling the inner body. All right, y'all, we got about 7 more pages and my back hurts. Give me a second. Ooh. There's another thing that happened. If you don't be on YouTube for a long time and you have to sit here still, chalet. It's time to move. Feeling the inner body. Although body identification is one of the most basic forms of ego, the good news is that it is also the one that you can most easily go beyond. This is done not by trying to convince yourself that you are not your body, but by shifting your attention from the external form of your body and from thoughts about your body, beautiful, ugly, strong, weak, too fat, too thin, to the feeling of aliveness inside it. No matter what your body's appearance is on the outer level, beyond the outer form, it is an intensely alive energy field. If you are not familiar with inner body awareness, close your eyes for a moment and find out if there is life inside your hands. Don't ask your mind. It will say, I can't feel anything. Probably it will also say, give me something more interesting to think about. So instead of asking your mind, go to the hands directly. By this, I mean, become aware of the subtle feeling of aliveness inside them. It is there. You just might have to go there with your attention to notice it. You may get a slight tingling sensation at first, then a feeling of energy or aliveness. If you hold your attention in your hands for a while, the sense of aliveness will intensify. Some people won't even have to close their eyes. They will be able to feel their inner hands at the same time as they read this. Then go to your feet. Keep your attention there but for a moment or so and begin to feel your hands and feet at the same time. Then incorporate other parts of the body, legs, arms, abdomen, chest, and so on, into that feeling until you are aware of the inner body as a global sense of aliveness. When I call the inner body, isn't really the body anymore, but life energy, the bridge between form and formlessness. Make it a habit to feel the inner body as often as you can. After a while, you won't need to close your eyes anymore to feel it. For example, see if you can feel the inner body whenever you listen to someone. It almost seems like a paradox. When you are in touch with the inner body, you are not identified with your body anymore, nor are you identified with your mind. This is to say, you are no longer identified with form, but moving away from form identification toward formlessness, which we may also call being. It is your essence identity. Body awareness not only anchors you in the present moment, it is a doorway out of the prison that is the ego. It also strengthens the immune system and the body's ability to heal itself. Forgiveness of being. I'm sorry, not forgiveness. Forgetfulness. I'm counting the pages, y'all. Woo, a sister is tired. Forgetfulness of being. Ego is always identification with form, seeking yourself and thereby losing yourself in some form. Forms are not just material objects and being and physical bodies. More fundamental than the external forms, things and bodies are the thought forms that continuously arise in the field of consciousness. They are energy formation, finer and less dense than physical matter, but they are form nonetheless. What you may be aware of as a voice in your head that never stops speaking is the stream of incessant and impulsive thinking. When every thought absorbs your mind completely, when you are identified with your voice in your head and the emotions that accompany it, that you lose yourself in every thought and every emotion, then you are totally identified with form and therefore in the grip of ego. Ego is a conglomeration of recurring thought forms and conditioned mental emotional patterns that are invested in a sense of I, a sense of self. Ego arises when your sense of beingness or I amness, which is formless consciousness, gets mixed up with form. This is the meaning of identification. This is a This is forgetfulness of being, the primary error, the illusion of absolute separateness that turns reality into a nightmare. Hey, mommy, tell mommy I said hey. I'm almost done. I got 1, 2, 4 more pages to go, and then I gotta go. And I'm gonna finish because I promised that I would. But my back hurts now. I'm sitting still. My physical being is ready to work out and chill and enjoy the rest of my Sunday. But I'm gonna finish because I started and I said I would finish. Form from Descartes' era to Sartre's insight. I don't know who those people are. Let's find out. The 17th century philosopher Descartes, regarded as the founder of modern philosophy, gave expression to this primary era with his famous dictum, which he saw as primary truth. I think, therefore I am. This was the answer he found to the question, is there anything I can know with absolute certainty? He realized that the fact that he was always thinking was beyond doubt, and so he equated thinking with being. That is to say, identity. I am with thinking. Instead of the ultimate truth, he had found the root of the ego, but he didn't know it. It took almost 300 years before another famous philosopher saw something in the statement that Descartes, as well as everybody else, had overlooked. His name was Jean-Paul Sartre. Sartre. He looked at Descartes' statement, I think, therefore I am, very deeply and suddenly realized in his own words, the consciousness that says, I am, is not the consciousness that thinks. What did he mean by that? When you are aware that you are thinking, that awareness is not part of thinking. It is a different dimension of consciousness. And it is that awareness that says, I am. If there were nothing but thought in you, you wouldn't even know you were thinking. You would be like a dreamer who doesn't know he is dreaming. You would be as identified with every thought as the dreamer is with every image in the dream. Many people still live like that, like sleepwalkers, trapped in old dysfunctional and mindsets that continuously recreate the same nightmarish reality. When you know you are dreaming, you are awake within the dream. Another dimension of consciousness has come in. The implication of Sartre's insight is profound, but he himself was still too identified with thinking to realize the full significance of what he had discovered, an emerging new dimension of consciousness. The peace that passes all understanding. We are on the last section. The peace that passes all understanding. There are many accounts of people who experience that emerging new dimension of consciousness as a result of tragic loss at some point in their lives. Some lost all of their possessions, others their children or spouse, their social position, reputation, or physical abilities. In some cases, through disaster or war, they lost all of these simultaneously and found themselves with nothing. We may call this a limit situation. Whatever they had identified with, whatever gave them their sense of self, had been taken away. Then suddenly and inexplicably, the anguish of intense fear they initially felt gave way to a sacred sense of presence, a deep peace and serenity and complete freedom from fear. This phenomenon must have been familiar to St. Paul, who used the expression, the peace of God which passeth all understanding. It is indeed a peace that doesn't seem to make sense. And the people who experienced it asked themselves, in the face of this, how can it be that I feel such peace? The answer is simple. Once you realize what the ego is and how it works. When forms that you had identified with that gave you your sense of self collapse or are taken away, it can lead to a collapse of the ego, since ego is identification with form. When there is nothing to identify with anymore, who are you? When forms around you die or death approaches, your sense of beingness, of I am, is free from its entanglement with form. Spirit is released from its imprisonment in matter. You realize your essential identity as formless, as an all pervasive presence of being prior to all forms, all identifications. You realize your true identity as consciousness itself, rather than what consciousness had identified with. That's the peace of God. The ultimate truth of who you are is not, I am this. It is not, I am that. It is, I am that. I am. Not everybody who experiences great loss also experiences this awakening, this disidentification from form. Some immediately create a strong mental image or thought form in which they themselves are a victim, whether it be of circumstances, other people, an unjust fate, or God. This thought form and the emotions it creates, such as anger, resentment, self pity, and so on, they strongly identify with, and it immediately takes the place of all the other identifications that have collapsed through the loss. In other words, the ego quickly finds a new form. The fact that this new form is a deeply unhappy one doesn't concern the ego too much, as long as it has an identity, good or bad. In fact, this new ego will be more contracted, more rigid, and impenetrable than the old one. Whenever tragic loss occurs, you either resist or you yield. Some people become bitter or deeply resentful. Others become compassionate, wise, and loving. Yielding means inner acceptance of what is. You are open to life. Resistance is an inner contraction, a hardening of the shell of the ego. You are closed. Whatever action you take in a state of my inner resistance, which we would also call negativity, will create more outer resistance. And the universe will not be on your side. Life will not be helpful. Its shutters are closed. The sunlight cannot come in. When you yield internally, when you surrender, a new dimension of consciousness opens up. If action is possible or necessary, your action will be in alignment with the whole and supported by creative intelligence, the unconditioned consciousness in which a state of inner peace opens you, of inner openness, you become one with. Circumstances and people then become helpful, cooperative. Coincidences happen. If no action is possible, you rest in the peace and inner stillness that come with surrender. You rest in God. That is the end of chapter 2. Chapter 3 is titled The Core of the Ego. I want to thank you all for being here. I would like to leave you with the words of Sinful the P as he talks about sacrifice. You have to sacrifice in this life. You also not just things, not just materialistics. You have to sacrifice you. You have to sacrifice your ego. You have to be in touch with the universe, with consciousness, to let go and let God. Thank you for being with me on this journey today. I hope I have helped someone other than myself. I love you. I appreciate you. Mwah. And I'll see you later.
Instagram. You're seeing all the A's on the report card. You didn't see the sacrifices that was made. Remember when Sin told you that the price of success is sacrifice. You cannot escape sacrifice. From spirituality to carnality, sacrifice is a necessity. You're going to have to sacrifice. You want that bitch? Sacrifice. Want that mansion? Sacrifice. You want them cars? Sacrifice. You want that jewelry? Sacrifice. You want that clout? Sacrifice. You want that body? Sacrifice. Even in God, you want that anointing? Sacrifice. You want to preach like that? Sacrifice. You want to be knowledgeable like that? Sacrifice. Whatever life you live, you cannot escape sacrifice.